Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. Well, we'll be launching today a global case study on how to regulate voluntourism with children. We are waiting for attendees to join. I see people are coming in. We have a lot of people registered. Let's give a few seconds that everybody joins us. And then we can start this webinar. I see we have attendees coming in. So warm welcome to everybody. It's such a great pleasure for us to launch today this global case study with actionable models on how to regulate voluntourism with children. My name is Gabriela Kuhn. I'm head of program on child protection in travel and tourism for ECPAT International, and I will be moderating this webinar today. And I have a great pleasure to welcome together with us today participation of Ms. Mama Fatima, the UN Special Rapporteur on Sale and Sexual Exploitation, ECPAT members from various countries, Better Care Network, civil society organizations, including the Down to Zero Alliance, as well as representatives from tourism authorities, business, all together here to launch this global case study on how to regulate the issue of volunteerism in all settings. So with this, I'm handing over to Guillaume Landry, Executive Director of ECPAT International.
Thank you, Gabriela. And this is only just a few words to introduce indeed Mama Fatima Singate. So she's the UN Special Rapporteur on Sale and Exploitation of Children. And it's really a pleasure to work with her on this and benefit from the immense leadership that she's put on the subject matter. It's a report that remains very timely, even though that has been already now, I believe, like nearly 2 years that has been submitted to the UN General Assembly. So let's immediately hear from her about the state of affair in regards to voluntourism. The floor is yours, Mama Fatima.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Guillaume. And it's always a pleasure to collaborate with ECPAT International and partners, especially on a subject matter that is really so close to my heart. And you're right, I presented this report 2 years ago, but it continues to be relevant because we know the issue of voluntarism is not properly understood. And that was the reason why I felt it was important to continue raising the issue and shining a light on the subject matter to create a better understanding of the issue. Now, in my report to the General Assembly 2 years ago, as you had indicated, I highlighted the fact that the word voluntarism was short for volunteer tourism, which is a form of tourism in which travelers participate in voluntary work, usually for charity, and it revolves around products offered through travel and tourism markets, usually for unskilled volunteers with no supervision, no background checks, criminal background checks required as an alternative to mass tourism. Now, in my report, I stated that it can include short or long-term volunteer opportunities, as well as customized placement, through which volunteers are able to work with or visit local communities, participate in teaching placements, childcare activities, or other activities with or for children, or visit with host families and communities, or volunteer in residential care facilities and orphanages. Now, it is important to note that while this concept is premised on noble intentions, the manifestations of exploitations of children and sexual abuse of children within this sector are now well acknowledged. And this is due to the fact that children are increasingly vulnerable and exposed to sexual exploitation, particularly in settings where legal protection is weak and child protection systems are inadequate or contain loopholes. And because child safeguarding measures vary significantly across sending and receiving countries of volunteers, gaps do arise with respect to their applicability, exposing children to greater risk of exploitation and sexual abuse. Now, it goes without saying that voluntarism-related trips and programs can inadvertently expose children to additional risks to their physical safety, to their well-being, and emotional and cognitive development, as unregulated and unsupervised placements lead to direct engagement with children in vulnerable settings with little to no safeguarding procedures or supervision in place. It also provides avenues for perpetrators to access and establish relationships with children, groom them, and eventually sexually exploit or sexually abuse them. Moreover, volunteering for a short period of time without appropriate skills, training, or experience can contribute to a sense of abandonment and traumatization repeatedly experienced by vulnerable children, and this in turn affects their ability to form secure attachments. Voluntarism also creates opportunities for unregistered or non-accredited private agencies to facilitate programs and packages and operate under conditions that encourage the commission of illegal acts and engagement in illicit practices, which has become rife in these settings and lead to corruption and impunity. The demand for unskilled volunteering involving work with children also creates problematic and unhealthy competition amongst agencies. Agencies usually finance their operations by charging fees to prospective volunteers. Now, the risk of abuse is greater when agencies establish privileged links with childcare facilities, as they may seek to ensure a constant supply of children to guarantee their relationship with these facilities, regardless of the actual child protection needs. Through unregulated operations, children are at risk of being trafficked. In fact, there have been instances where children weren't adoptable even when their parents are still alive, and there were no measures in place to safeguard children and protect them from illegal adoptions. Agencies frequently claim that they lack knowledge of illegal activities or that they lack control over intermediaries in countries of origin. Yet, we see the financial gain associated with these unlawful practices, and these are usually linked to money laundering activities, often calls their claims into question. Sadly, the challenges to preventing the sexual abuse or the exploitation of children through voluntarism are many and they are varied. They include the lack of specific laws for many states that specifically address voluntarism. And this makes it difficult to bring voluntarism-related activities within the scope of the law in order to monitor and regulate the industry. Even where child safeguarding legislation and regulations exist, law enforcement measures in place are quite limited. And this may be due to limited resources or due to limited technical expertise, corruption, or lack of political will to prioritize this issue. Now, these factors can hinder efforts to gather data on the extent and the prevalence of voluntarism in specific countries, which is essential for developing targeted prevention and intervention responses. And this includes training of frontline workers, awareness raising campaign, and support services for survivors of exploitation and abuse. Now, the activities under voluntarism are not often subjected to strict implementation in criminal law. There are usually no mandatory rules for private sector with respect to conducting comprehensive background checks, vetting, maintaining a minimum threshold for qualifications, skills, and experience, and preparation of the volunteer tourists. Compared with transnational nature of trafficking for the purposes of sexual exploitation and abuse, the issue of voluntarism is equally complex, as it involves multiple stakeholders, including governments, agencies, non-government organizations, and private companies. And there's often a lack of coordination and cooperation amongst them. In practice, very few countries have evoked extraterritorial legislation or used it to hold their citizens accountable so as to ensure that they are penalized for a crime committed in another country. Now, the constraints on resources and jurisdictional conflicts are often cited as obstacles to bringing actions against a person involved in crimes committed against children. Also, the lack of training concepts and limited knowledge among staff within the, within the industry and volunteer tourists on the importance of child protection and responsible and ethical tourism practices within the tourism industry also contribute to the challenge of preventing the exploitation of children through voluntourism. Some may not realize, for instance, that volunteering at an orphanage can cause harm to children by fostering the perpetuation of their separation from their families and the disruption of their lives, education, and development. Others may not be aware of the cultural and social nuances in life in the communities that they are visiting, which can lead to unintentional disrespect or offense. Nevertheless, there are examples of positive practices associated with various steps that have been taken by governments and non-government actors to address existing challenges to preventing the exploitation and sexual abuse of children through volunteerism. Strengthening of child protection legislation and standard is an important example for addressing these challenges, and some governments regulate volunteer work through legislation that set out the definition of volunteering, eligibility criteria on who can be a volunteer, the service that they can provide, their rights and responsibilities, and the rights and obligations to the beneficiary of the volunteer's work. Whether they occur in an organized or isolated manner, deliberately or inadvertently, child sexual abuse and exploitation through volunteerism involve the participation and facilitation within the industry of many different actors, and the effort of every sector is therefore necessary to establish and implement standards that tackle and address the exploitation and abuses of children through volunteerism at national, regional, and international levels. There are many examples of training sessions among stakeholders and initiatives of civil society organizations engaging in awareness raising, sharing of information, and developing guidelines for stakeholders in regions across the globe. Stakeholders can work together to coordinate volunteer programs. For example, some countries have established agencies or entities that coordinate national volunteer services mandated to promote and coordinate volunteer programs and services in the country with government institutions and other stakeholders, as well as maintain a centralized registry for the identity of all domestic workers or domestic volunteers. Others have put in place integrated public policies for child protection, working in collaboration with private sector to implement preventive policies with goals that include adopting codes for the protection of children from sexual exploitation in the tourism sector. Thorough safeguard can ensure that volunteers are qualified and meet requirements in line with the scope of the activity that they perform. And this would require extensive screening to be conducted and the development of robust databases. Some countries have laws that requires local and foreign companies, organizations, and institutions of higher education to conduct background check and verify that volunteers have not been convicted or prohibited from engaging in a professional or voluntary activity involving habitual contact with children abroad. Continuous awareness raising and sensitization activities is required to ensure that both professionals and volunteers are aware of the issues and risks that children may be exposed to through these programs, as well as the domestic and extraterritorial legislations, accountability measures, and reporting channels that exist in individual countries. Many sending countries, travel agencies, airline, tourism companies, tour operators, and other stakeholders have developed information materials and other methods to inform tourists, travelers, and volunteers about child sexual abuse and exploitation existing and emerging in various tourism destinations. Now, to address the root causes that contribute to the exploitation and sexual abuse of children through unskilled and unregulated volunteering in residential care facilities and orphanages, some states working with stakeholders have put in place structural and sustainable solutions. And these include investment in poverty reduction, food security, sexual and reproductive health rights and services. Some governments have also allocated grants to civil society organizations to develop and implement programs to combat the exploitation of children. Training and capacity building activities have also been conducted on a regular basis for child protection officials and social workers. They are usually provided with information on issues relating to child sexual abuse and exploitation and how it is relevant to key aspects of their work in areas such as legal framework, complaint handling, understanding profiles of victims and offenders, assessing risk factors, and safeguarding protocols on prevention and protection. Overall, there are many good examples associated with practices to protect children from exploitation and sexual abuse through voluntarism, but challenges and gaps continue to remain. And to bridge those gaps, a lot more work needs to be done, especially at local level, in not only building capacities within receiving countries, but effective coordination and collaboration between sending and receiving countries. We all have a role to play in ensuring that voluntarism is regulated, child safeguarding measures are strengthened and enforced, and volunteer tourists are screened before visiting and working within communities. I thank you so much for your attention.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Mama Fatima. It's such a powerful account that help us to understand the extent of the problem, its various manifestations, the necessity to act, and the different entry points of how we can really make a difference on this. And the reason why ECPAT International, thanks to the support of UBS Optimus Foundation and in collaboration with the Better Care Network, decided to move with this case study is to give a sense of action, to give more clarity about the possibilities to do something, because it's not a theoretical discussion. It's already happening. And there are sort of really important example practices emerging that can inspire through actions how we can have a ripple effect. I would list perhaps 4 areas that the case studies highlight in particular. I think the first one is we are faced with a challenge of misunderstanding or neglecting the nature of what the problem is about. Oftentimes we speak with actors in the travel and tourism sector, we speak with civil society organizations, regulators, destinations, and basically in general we say, oh, you know what, this is not really so big here, right? It's always thinking it's happening somewhere else, it's not so relevant, it's not the most visible aspect. However, the more you talk about it, the more people are having that kind of moment of realizing, yeah, okay, this I see, this. And then it's sort of, we need to build collectively an awareness of why we should care about this. And that also includes understanding the different entry points and manifestations. So Mama Fatima listed many. It's important in our mindset to understand that this is about different phenomena that can come together. It's about someone going to volunteering in a school to teach different languages. It's about someone who will volunteer in a sport club to play with children with football or soccer, how we call it. It's about diplomat, peacekeepers, humanitarian personnel on their day off volunteering in an orphanage during the weekend as something on the side that gives more meaning and purpose to their whole experience of being abroad. It's about missionaries and faith-based organizations who go to remote communities and contribute with a lot of good intentions and supporting all sorts of development issues there. It's a lot of university students as part of their diploma who are required to go for an extended period of time in another setting to practice something, to do an internship with an organization that involves engaging with a volume of children. You have to think a bit about young people as much as people in their retirement traveling. It's men and it's women. It's about people traveling within their countries. It's a north-south reality. It's a south-south reality. It is very diverse. One of the entry points that we found very powerful, and I think we'll hear from Maruf, an expert from Sri Lanka there, is just going on the internet and surfing. And if you're typing those kind of opportunity between a destination or a country and an origin, you will see a lot of offers. And that says something. It means there's money behind. There's an offer because there's a market for it. And there's a lot of companies who are relying to this type of packages to distinguish themselves and offer something. So this awareness, this realization that it's not just a side issue or something limited, it is a critical aspect of sexual exploitation of children in travel and tourism. And we must embrace that reality to be agile and have distinct approaches to address its complex manifestation. So I think that's the first aspect that you will see in the case study being detailed with a lot of examples on how we can build a compelling case and rallying people around the importance of doing something on this subject matter. You will find as well a lot of arguments and entry points from the regulatory point of view, and we'll have a dedicated panel of people who explain the importance for the state, for the local authorities to be able to codify this. And Mama Fatima was very clear, this isn't about fighting voluntourism in general. It's not being against the opportunity for travelers to engage on purposeful experiences while they're abroad. It's about framing it in a way that children don't become tourist attraction, that we're not doing it, even though we might have good intention, in a way that will harm children. It's basic requirements. And in that sense, it's not complicated to regulate that space. There are some complexity in the way the system is organized and requires different modes of intervention. And I think Rebecca, among others, will be explaining the complexities of operationalizing the codification of those regulations. But in itself, having a thorough approach that allows us to understand the importance of codifying this is really significant, and it goes into making sure that we monitor the entry, about sort of checking background of people being in contact with children, in some cases requiring some permits that have in behind all sorts of requirements, so that we just are as careful as when we recruit ordinary citizens to work in premises where children are located, and applying that to the context of volunteering as well. So the second aspect of regulation is strongly established. The third aspect of the case study is looking at the private sector engagement. So the complexity of the setting that would involve platforms that facilitate access. There are tour operators, there's transport industry, there's going to be hospitality involved. There are those who are selling packages in particular. There are all of the intermediaries. There are many people involved who can do something to make sure that, yes, we promote opportunities to do good while engaging in travel and tourism, but again, doing it with minimal safeguarding and draw a line of what's acceptable and not acceptable. And again, in that sense, it's fantastic to hear example, and we'll hear more today in a dedicated panel on this, and how companies are already doing that filtering and determining how it can remain profitable for them to engage in this sector while withdrawing some packages they had before, while being able to monitor and draw a line of what's acceptable and not acceptable. So hopefully that also influence others to embark in that process and continue to be successful as a business model, while doing it not against the development of children living in the communities where the guests are being located. And finally, there is the aspect of community mobilization as well. How do we make sure that the very people living in those communities and witnessing those risks, witnessing concerns, what can they do about it? It embraces both the prevention aspect as well as the response. And we need to make sure that there's not a social tolerance for that, and that we can draw the line of collectively, where do we start saying no, and what do we do when that line is being crossed? So again, many examples of how together there's a multi-sectoral approach that can be built in making sure that collectively we're doing our part and we're saying no to those harmful aspects that can be a part of such a business development. So that's a little bit the perspective. The case study is giving concrete examples from different countries on what is currently already being done, so that it's easier to being able to invite and modify and get involved and adapt those emerging practices in some something that makes sense in different business model, context for the states and community practices and so forth. So I hope you'll have a chance to browse through it, but for now I'll stop here and hand over to Gabriela.
Thank you so much, Guillaume and Mama Fatima, and that gave us a great background to start the panel discussion. So we will have now 3 short panels reflecting on different elements from the case study and the experiences also from other organizations. I will start with the first panel in which we will speak with civil society organizations that piloted approaches to regulating voluntourism, both from sending and destination countries' perspective. As you mentioned, Mama Fatima, that's exactly very important that there is a coordination between these levels. So I'm very happy to introduce Ana Maria Dionella, who is Executive Director of ECPAT Philippines, Mohamed Maharouf, Executive Director of ECPAT Sri Lanka, and Celine, who is Program Coordinator on Children's Rights and Sexual Exploitation for Defense of Children, ECPAT Netherlands. We worked together over the last year, and I would like to ask you to reflect why addressing the issue of voluntourism is necessary from the perspective of your countries, and the complexity of this setting and various entry points was mentioned by Guillaume and Mama Fatima. So what did you identify as the key entry points through which this issue can be addressed? So over to you, Anna, as the first panelist opening this discussion. Anna?
Yeah, thank you very much, Gabriela, Guillaume, and Mama Fatima. You know, even as we have been already participating in this, ECPAT Philippines continues to learn, you know. There were many other significant things that Mama Fatima said, Guillaume summarized, but I think I continue to reflect and reflect and reflect. This is such a complex problem. And why do we need to act? Because as Guillaume says, we need to understand what is this problem all about. Okay. So generally in our country, we found out that even if there was a study done, the study has not really resulted in generating high awareness about the complexity of this issue. Children continue to be harmed by the practice of voluntourism, but the practice of voluntarism, as we know it, does not immediately expose insidious harm to abuse and exploitation of children in the country. Okay, so it's really, you have to go deep down and really understand how the practice of voluntarism is creating more harm, no? For children to be abused and exploited. It's not an easy thing to, but I think that is one of the reasons why we need to act, you know, in addressing the issue of voluntarism. The other thing is, as a state party, to implementing the Convention on the Rights of the Child, it's our obligation to really expose how children's rights to abuse and exploitation, the right to special protection, are not being safeguarded at all. So because of that obligation, we need to really act to address this issue of voluntarism in the country. There are many other things that we need to understand, which is not really obvious. Now on the, I just have 5 minutes, so I will just, so what are the key points that we have identified? In the Philippines, it was very important for us to really understand what change are we trying to generate here. Change among whom? Change. So we needed to first look into the actors that would be involved in the change process. We needed also to come up with an understanding of the enabling environment in which this change will take place and how that change can take place. So the first entry point is the actors. So knowing the landscape of the Philippines, the governance structure, we looked at the key actors at the national and subnational level. We looked at how their roles can complement each other in trying to effect the change, in trying to really put safeguards, better safeguards, so that children will not be harmed. Children will not be exposed to abuse and exploitation. Okay, so that was the first thing. What is the role of the Department of Tourism? What is the role of subnational government? who are the key actors there, who are the social workers there, and everything. So all those things needed to be put in place. We needed to understand the stakeholders, and what complementary role they have. So that's one of the things we did. The second is enabling environment. What policy and program environment exists in the country which we can take advantage of? We need to really see points of how we can sustain it through policy and programs. Is there something in the Department of Tourism which really points us to the right direction of the change that we want? So in the Philippines, we saw how the Department of Tourism, and I think my colleague Ryan Sebastian, or our partner Ryan Sebastian, will talk about this more. But we saw that the Department of Tourism has been a champion or promoter of child rights in the country. So they have initiated a sort of a policy which has now become a program, a capacity development program called Tourism Works. And that's where we launched this program, because we saw how important it is to really work together with them to really review how this policy can be used as the starting point for regulating voluntourism in the country. And that resulted to training programs, revising modules, awareness raising, creating messages and doing a lot of things with the Department of Tourism. But at the same time, we had to look at the policy environment at the local level. And this means working with, as Mama Fatima said, at the local level, where really you have the volunteerists, possibly causing harm to children. They may have noble intentions, but they're not aware of that. So we looked at the child protection policy. We looked at how local laws on child protection are being implemented at the subnational level. And we had to involve there key stakeholders as well, because working on child protection involves multi-stakeholder. And we had to look at not only local government units, we had to look at private sector, who are the tourism stakeholders there, and non-government organizations, even faith-based organizations. And the third is how change can take place. So here, this requires, we had to look at advocacy methods. We had to look at what can you expect, what messages will reach what type of audiences, what actions can be expected from them. We had to do a lot of capacity development on the modules that we have developed, and we have trained people on the various stakeholders. We had to look at enhancing child protection policy and programs, that protect children from being sexually exploited, being abused and exploited within the voluntourism context. There's a lot more I can say about that, but I think those were the key things that I wanted to say on this question: is why is addressing the issue of volunteerism with children necessary, and what key points have we identified? So overall, it's really looking at how do you build sustainability from the beginning, because we cannot just, do one training and then that's it. We needed to look at how this policy changes, this program changes can be accepted by people, can be understood by all stakeholders, and as the Department of Tourism says, the communities have to really understand and take care of their own children, in a voluntourism context. Because voluntourism is not that simple, it's very complex. And that's, I think, ECPAT Philippines, those are the reflections on this first question.
Thank you so much,
you.
Anna. And in fact, that work on local level was very important, especially in the decentralized structure of the Philippines. Thank you for presenting your experiences. And now we'll hand over to Maharuf.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. Good afternoon, everyone, and greetings from ECPAT, Sri Lanka. I will talk about why addressing the issue of voluntourism with children is necessary and what key entry points we have identified to make change to protect children in Sri Lanka. Like any other developing country, many people come to Sri Lanka to help children in schools, orphanages, and other community settings. While the intention may be good, voluntourism can sometimes harm children instead of helping them. Why is this a problem? One major issue is orphanage tourism. When tourists visit orphanages to help, it can actually make the situation worse. Some orphanages keep children in poor conditions to attract more volunteers and donations. This creates a business out of children's suffering. Also, when children form emotional bonds with volunteers who leave after a short time, it can harm their development and make them vulnerable and abuse and exploitation. Another issue is that some voluntourism projects focus more on making the volunteers feel good rather than truly helping local communities. This can lead to activities that do not bring real lasting change and may even harm local efforts to develop and improve living conditions. So what can we do to protect children? The case study from Sri Lanka highlights several key points of action. We also organized several national events, and prepared a framework for regulating voluntourism in Sri Lanka. I have identified 6 points from both documents, which are as follows. The point number 1, regulation and laws. Sri Lanka needs better laws and policies to manage voluntourism. Right now, the rules do not clearly say how voluntourism should work, which allows unsafe practice to continue. The government should update the Tourism Act to include rules on voluntourism. We are working with relevant institutions to advocate for such changes. Point number 2, stopping orphanage tourism. The government decided in 2022 to stop foreign volunteers from working in childcare centers, which was a positive step. However, we must push forward strong enforcement and ensure that no loopholes allow orphanages tourism to continue. Additionally, some local travelers visit orphanages under the pretext of philanthropy, which is also a serious concern. Although the government has closed orphanages to volunteers, the schools remain open for foreigners to enter and teach languages. The third point is raising awareness, already spoken about it. Anyway, many people do not know the risk of voluntourism. We need national campaigns to raise awareness and educate tourists, communities, and organizations. If volunteers understand the dangers, they can choose safer and more ethical ways to help. Point number 4, clear guidance for organization. Some private businesses, religious groups, and NGOs bringing volunteers to Sri Lanka without proper child protection measures. The government should create strict guidelines that all volunteerism programs must follow, making sure children's safe is the top priority. Point number 5, proper visa category for volunteers. Many volunteers come on tourist visas, which do not allow volunteering. We advocate for the government to introduce a special visa for volunteers. This would allow authorities to monitor who works with children and ensure they meet safety standards. The final point is for better coordination among stakeholders. The framework for regulating volunteerism in Sri Lanka insists that the government, private sector, child protection agencies, and civil society must work together to create safer volunteerism program. The National Child Protection Authority is already leading efforts to develop national guidelines on child protection tourism for Sri Lanka. We support their work in developing strong child protection policies and rules, including volunteerism. In conclusion, volunteerism can be force for good, but only if done the right way. We must protect children from harm by regulating volunteerism, educating people, and creating safe policies. By working together, we can make sure that voluntourism in Sri Lanka truly helps communities and protects most vulnerable, our children. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Maharov. It was a pleasure working together over the last year, exploring these entry points and making changes in Sri Lanka. And I'll hand over now to Selina to bring your perspective of how you're generating change in the Netherlands.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Gabriella, and thank you to ECPAT International and the UN Special Rapporteur, Mama Fatima, for this global attention to the protection of children within voluntourism. And also thank you for the contributions from the destination perspective. That's really interesting for us as a sending country. For us, it is very necessary to keep paying attention to this topic because in the Netherlands, the protection of children against sexual exploitation is different when it concerns Dutch children in comparison with children abroad. When people want to work with children in the Netherlands, they need to have a background check and it needs to be renewed every couple of years. When people go abroad and they want to work with children, even voluntarily or paid, there is no such measures and no such mandatory background check. So I think that is really strange. Why should Dutch children be any different of children abroad? So that is why we find it very important to keep making this point to the government. In 2019, the government conducted a big research on the issue, and it also came some important recommendations from this research. But we see, unfortunately, that very few of these recommendations came into practice. So that is why it is very important for NGOs like us to keep asking attention for this important matter. Also, the government currently decreased the financial support for international projects and especially also on the sexual and reproductive health. So that is also not helping the issue from the Netherlands perspective. It is also necessary to keep on paying attention to the subject because there are still people who don't know what kind of harm they can contribute to when they go voluntarily work voluntarily in orphanages, for instance. So that is why continuous and structural campaigning keep important. What we found as key entry points is the Better Care Network. The Netherlands is a cooperation between different organizations such as Defence for Children and ECPAT in the Netherlands. And the Better Care Network has developed a checklist for private funds to assess proposals with children so that they can see if it is in the best interest of the child. So we support them also to ask the right questions and see if the project that they will be funding will be the right one to go. Let me see. The second key entry point for us is from the research from the government in 2019. It made clear that the biggest the biggest organizations, the most organizations who send volunteers abroad are in the Netherlands private initiatives. Those are just people, ordinary people who go on a holiday in a foreign country and they see like, oh, this is really bad for children and I want to help. So they start an orphanage without any knowledge on the protection of children or what the policy of the country is. To have good support for children. And they spend all their money and all the efforts in it. So it is also very difficult to actually convince them that what they are doing is actually not in the best interest of the child. So the Better Care Network Netherlands has individual guidance they work with private initiatives to transform the orphanages to family-based care. And that is really individual support, and the private initiatives also ask other private initiatives to join. So it is really individual support, which we see is really successful. We also developed an online course for organizations on child protection policies, which is also interesting. And another entry port are the universities, because universities and applied universities also send volunteers or students for internship to orphanages. So we have a pledge for these universities to sign, stating that they will not send any students to orphanages abroad. We also have a pledge for the private initiatives as well, and now about 75 private initiatives have signed this pledge. Finally, we keep on the final entry point is still the volunteers themselves, and because we keep on campaigning, and last year we did a campaign that was volunteering thanks, in orphanages no thanks. So there was also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who has liked this, shared this campaign, and even the Minister of Development Cooperation shared the campaign on their social media. UNICEF, also influencers, and the largest Dutch news broadcast foundation also gave attention to this important campaign. So I cannot emphasize enough that structural campaigning, structural attention for this important topic will be necessary also in the future. So thank you, ECPAT International, for also organizing this global case study.
Thank you so much, Celine. And in fact, the experiences from the Netherlands are documented there, along with the other countries. And the reason why we did this case study is actually to document the good approaches, what works, what can be done to make change. And with this, I would like to start the second panel, where we have a great pleasure of being joined by the representatives of authorities, of tourism, and of business that actually partnered with ECPAT members and with other organizations to make this change. So I would like to introduce the panel with Mr. Pino, who is the Director of Child Welfare Department of the Ministry of Social Affairs, Veterans and Youth Rehabilitations from Cambodia. Mr. Ryan Sebastian, who is Chief Tourism Operation Officer from Manpower Training Division of the Office of Human Capital Development in the Philippines. And from Sri Lanka, we have a great pleasure of having with us Ms. Dinanja Kumarasinghe, who is Senior Department Head of Sustainability of the company Workers Tours Limited. So I would like to thank you for joining us and for working together with our members in your respective countries. And I would like to invite you to share the examples of approaches, what works, and how you've been addressing the issue of volunteerism with children. And I will start with Mr. Pino from Cambodia. Over to you.
Thank you. Do you hear me?
Yes, we cannot see you yet, but we can hear you.
Yes. Allow me to turn off the video because my place low internet service. So if I open the video, maybe the internet is not close as well. So allow me to turn off the video. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. You can please go ahead. We can hear you well.
Yeah. Thank you, and hello everyone. And it is a great honor for me to participate in this important event to share on regulating the issues of the volunteerism with children who lives in the residential care facility in Cambodia. Maybe you know the Cambodia, we have the population of the children who live in residential care institution. A large amount of the children if compared to other countries, especially after Cambodia, after the civil war in Cambodia. Based on the mapping in 2015 that Ministry of Social Affairs in collaborated with UNICEF, we found that we have a large number of children who live in RCI, residential care facility, and we found many problems, especially the child abuse, violence, or the negative impacts of the child care in residential on social, physical, psychological, and intellectual development of children if we compare to the children who live in the family. Additionally, additionally, you, as you all aware, the study on the volunteerism and volunteerism of the RCI revealed that universal and unqualified visitor volunteer mission group were allowed to visit children in care center. This frequent change and can impact can get negative impact children social and emotional development and make them more vulnerable to abuse. Additional, some visitor and volunteer at the child care center may be allowed to be alone with the children and may with children without supervision. It is it is an impact that I do agree with the study that the speaker said previously. We have the many many negative impacts of the children who live in the RCI that we allow for the visitor or volunteer volunteer. In Cambodia, we have the in order to address this problem in Cambodia, we have the key intervention, especially especially from the 2015. Mostly, we start to make a policy for care reform. Especially, we start to create the program for care reform. We promote the family-based care, and then we reintegrate children from residential care institution to their family, and we strengthen the inspection system of inspection into the residential care facility. Yeah, in order to achieve this goal, the government, especially Ministry of Social Affairs, we set three strategy. First, strengthen the legal framework and implementation or development clear action plan and improve knowledge sharing research document. It is about the strengthening legal framework and implementation. The Cambodia, we developed the sub-degree to oversee residential care in Cambodia. Through this sub-degree, we developed the inspection. We reformed the inspection tool, and then we strengthen the capacity of the inspector to do inspect the RCI in Cambodia. If we found that based on the inspection, we found that we include the oversee of the volunteerism, and then we set- we in we guide to all the RCI in Cambodia must be follow the government policy, especially child safeguard, child safeguarding, because we need to protect the children if the RCI allow the visitor or a volunteerism to enter the center. And then we start to develop the procedure for reintegrate the children from RCI to the community. We promote the family-based care through we create the foster care program and the procedure for implementation. We, based on the government policy, family-based care is the first option. The center is the last option and temporary. And we have the program for gatekeeping, means we want to keep children in the family and want to prevent child separation from their family. Also, we collaborated with the other relevant ministry to develop the standard operational uh, standard of the operational on child protection, that this time that we say the system or mechanism for protect children for protection for protect children or the test for report the test for transfer the cash and to do cash management. This SOP is important. We when This SOP is important for strengthen the mechanism of system for transportation, including volunteerism, and we have the mechanism for prevent or for restrict the visitor that want to be a volunteer in the center. We developed the system, cash management system through the Primrose system. It's important that this system can respond to the child abuse or violence. So when have the child protection test, the social worker that is a case worker can respond the case quickly. And
thank you so
otherwise,
much.
I want to add up one more. We develop the capacity building for the social worker is important because in Cambodia is a young country that we don't have enough social worker. But based on the care reform program, we promote and strengthening the capacity of the social worker. The social worker is play important role for to do case management and respond for child protection in the community in subnational level, and then provide the technical support and service for child protection. It is a progress or mechanism the progress or approach that Cambodia has done for child protection, especially for especially prevent child abuse from the violent tourism. Thank you for provide the opportunity to me for sharing the practice in Cambodia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pino, for sharing these experiences and examples. And I will now hand over to Mr. Ryan to share with us the approaches of what works, the examples of actionable approaches from the Philippines.
Thank you very much, and mabuhay everyone. The Philippines, I believe, is on the second wave of volunteerism as a destination, as a volunteer destination. In the 1990s up to early 2000, we have the Bahay Kalinga, where mostly Europeans, school leavers, would visit to give opportunities for the people that benefited from free houses for them, as provided by the various local governments and by the various organizations with the support of the local government and of course the private sector. But for this year, we are starting to have we're developing more destinations. These destinations would include volunteerism destinations in communities that are resilient communities that are usually affected by the climate change. We have volunteer opportunities for heritage, volunteer opportunities for ecotourism, and of course, sustainable farming. But thank you very much to Ms. Anna and ECPAT. Together with us, we lobbied that for the training of the communities and the beneficiaries of these volunteer tourism destinations, the module for the protection of women and children should always be included. This is as she mentioned earlier, this is all about the Tourism Works program. Tourism Works means tourism integrates, supports, and minds women's rights and child safety. And we would like to thank ECPAT for the support because you are the main speakers in this. We train the people, we give them information on the importance of saving and protecting women and children in various aspects of the tourism industry, in the various destinations and activities. So with that, we ensured that certain places like orphanages and schools are not included in these volunteer destinations. Okay, and what worked well, this is what we call the whole of nation approach, where we do the tripartite deals and coordination. It's always the government, the private sector, and most importantly, the community. Aside from the support of non-governmental organizations such as ECPAT, the role of the community is very important, as well as the local government units. They need to work together. They need to learn about laws. They need to learn ways on how to protect the women and children. And so we also involved the Philippine National Police in charge of safety and security, not only of the community, but of the tourists visiting these destinations. We also work together closely with the Department of Social Welfare and Development, which is in charge of the welfare of children and women. And most importantly, we work together with the tourism stakeholders, from the tour operators, the transportation that brings the tourists to the area, and of course, the tour guides that would guide them within the destination. And how do we do this? We always conduct the Tourism Works program for them. At the same time, we mentioned about volunteerism and the importance of protecting children and women. Ms. Anna earlier on discussed that we even coach them on how to make local ordinances to make the implementation of the protection of women and children stronger. Before, many tourists would visit schools. But now, our Department of Education has requested the tourism stakeholders to request a permit, to write them a letter and get a permit before they allow tourists in schools. Orphanages, we don't have any problem because in the Philippines, the Department of Social Welfare and Development discourages visit to orphanages. Okay, and then we're also very fortunate to have in the Philippines what we call the Interagency Council Against Trafficking, where almost all government agencies in charge of protecting women and children, and at the same time ensuring that anti-trafficking will be lessened or even eradicated, are working together. This is a council also composed of the private sector. ECPAT used to sit there as one of our, this is really one of the best avenues to discuss issues and concerns regarding the protection of women and children, because this council even pushes for the amendment of our anti-trafficking laws. And we were successful 2 years ago. Our anti-trafficking law was amended and updated. So to summarize, the whole of nation approach is very important. The proper destination planning is also very, very important. Information dissemination through training for them to understand the importance of protecting women and children of the community and also the tourists visiting their area. But the most important thing is preparing the community. As Ms. Anna shared earlier, we believe that the community can best protect their women and children. And how to do that? We can do training. We can do capacity building. We can do human capacity building for them. And how sustainable will that be? The next problem, the next concern is that will these trainings be sustainable? We are very happy to share with everyone that in the Philippines, we have this gender and development law that earmarks around 5% of our total budget in the department for projects relating to women and children, and the tourism works training will continue because of this. So with that, again, thank you very much, ECPAT, for all the support. You have always been there for us, decades already, Miss Anna, right? So thank you. And as we say here, let us protect our children, let us love the Philippines. Mabuhay. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing very practical approaches and also that relate to schools and protecting children in this context. And I will now hand over to Ms. Dinanja from Sri Lanka. Thank you for sharing with us your approaches, and it's very important to hear from the private sector.
Hello, everyone. Firstly, I would like to thank ECPAT International for organizing this topic. And thank you, Mr. Maharoof and the team from Sri Lanka. So what I want to say here is that this is we are talking about the third foreign exchange earner to Sri Lanka. So we have to ensure that when we get this income, that the vulnerable population in the country is safeguarded even if we are earning the foreign exchange. So this is a huge topic, but even though our organization is not directly involved in providing long-term voluntourism activities, it is important that we address this issue as a tourism-related topic overall. So looking at this aspect, we have drawn down certain best practices within our company. So I would define it with mainly 5 points. So number one would be the responsible travel tips document that we have developed to engage the client, our service providers, and of course with our internal stakeholders. So as we learned in the previous discussion, this is a very complex problem. It is not very easy to define the voluntourism and the normal tourism, and especially being in a tropical destination where tourists will get engaged in different activities. It is important to safeguard the children's rights. So having this in mind, we have developed these guidelines also to go into the minds of the tourists in a very easy and attractive manner, because sometimes when they're on holidays, they might not be interested in reading a lot of information in a written form. So we have taken steps to depict this kind of information in a pictorial manner, like even the hotline number. It is important that we carry this message across all the images and all the material that we have going around in the company towards the tourists. So this is one of the key things. And also our approach is not only limited to having a policy, because having a policy getting trickled down to the stakeholders is what is important, including the clients, including to the service providers. So having this in mind, we also have developed a code of conduct for our service providers who would be taking these tourists to the destinations. So they have to adhere to these explicit clauses in the code of conduct that we have implemented. And to execute this, we have an onboarding process. When we get them on, we train them on the code of conduct on various aspects on a dedicated day. So they will have an in-depth understanding of what do's and don'ts and where to report if they find an incident. So these are very interesting topics, and it's a way of getting engaged in addressing the real root cause of this problem. Next is the contracts. Of course, this is more formal. I think most of the businesses might be doing this also on having the correct clauses in the contract and agreements. So these things are like a mandatory thing. I do understand that we belong to one of the big conglomerates and big establishment, but what we carry is that when we do something right, the message will get trickled down to all the other businesses. And when we approach something in a bigger way, we expect the others to follow through. So this is the impression, and this is what we want to create within this topic. And then the trainings we also have, because having one particular person will not be able to address this issue. So we have participated in Train the Trainers program, so that we populate the number of people who can train the suppliers and service providers on this subject. So this is a very important area. So we collaborate with leads and these kind of established places to carry out these trainings for us as well as for the service providers. Then the other last thing I want to say would be the coordination mechanism. So as I'm part of the ECPAT program as well as the National Child Protection Authority, I think it's important that we address this problem not in the organizational capacity, but we have to address it is in a national level, because it's a national problem. It doesn't matter what company tagline that you carry, but we have to create the correct understanding and the impact towards the industry and carry one message to address if there are any issues or any gaps, without saying that it's not there. We have to say that whatever possible methods that we can do to stop this and identify this, report this, and get out of it. So I would like to thank everyone for giving me this opportunity to speak to you all on these few points. Yes, I would like to stop on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was very inspiring, and indeed we need all the companies to take approaches to protect children and regulate that issue of voluntourism, and working together towards building this global movement for change. And that brings us to the third and last panel, where we'll speak with Åsa Grahn, who is associate professor at the Norwegian School of Hotel Management, and she's joined also by her students who participated in a campaign. We have with us Katerina Ton from OSCE, Program and Capacity Builder Officer from the Office of the Special Representative and Coordinator for Combating Trafficking in Human Beings. And we have with us Rebecca Knepp, Senior Technical Advisor from Better Care Network, with whom I actually work together on developing this case study and bringing experiences and from various countries. So I'd like to invite all three of you to reflect from your perspectives how we can use the momentum of this global case study and other work that is being done by other organizations to build this global movement and use this momentum to shift the approaches to voluntourism in all settings. So first I will invite Asa, who is here also with the students. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Gabriela, and thank you for allowing us, me and my students, to come and share a little bit our thoughts about this. First of all, I think it's vital to start now with this document that we have, this global case study, and start using it, to start sharing it throughout different actors around us. Because as we have heard today, we're all sitting in different places around the world with different opportunities. So me representing a university, we have our responsibilities, I think, for this. So by saying that, I mean, it will be important to prioritize collaboration, education and awareness raising through this. And now we have this crucial document that can help us to be more concrete in what we are actually talking about and doing when we talk about voluntary tourism and safeguarding children at the destinations. So for us to as a university to make this move, I think we need to tell the stories. We need to bring out the messages around the youth. Norway sends a lot of youths as volunteer tourists around the world. And we think it's very important then to be able to reach these different segments of the population. So at this university, we have a course called Responsible Tourism, where we talk about volunteer tourism as one case, and now it will be filled with even more information, important information throughout this case study. We collaborate with ECPAT Norway, who actually has designed and also offer a workshop for our students. But through this, we have learned from our students, and which you also will hear from my students, that we might be a little bit late. It's meaning we need to reach the youth. So ECPAT Norway and my university, we have then piloted this workshops that is based on information, obviously, from ECPAT, to high schools, so to the younger level of students, to reach them, make them aware a little bit of what this means. What does it mean that we volunteer? But the market is huge. So for us, it's a matter of reaching out to teachers at high schools, for example, so they also should be aware of what, you know, when they teach about travel and tourism, so they also need to learn about the consequences. The way forward, we think, and what we can do with this document is, now that we have a more concrete piece of work that we actually can use more actively in our teaching or in our awareness raising messages that we do. So for my students who has been doing, you know, a little bit of advocacy, a little bit of awareness raising campaigns throughout the semester work that they've been doing, they have now, obviously 3 of them have been asked of ECPAT Norway and International to take part of the global campaign, which is of course purely volunteer for them. It's not part of school or anything, but this shows that if we start working with them, they will be open to actually do more, because they keep learning about those, you know, difficult areas as this is. So I think it's even more important or more interesting to hear from them, who are the young generation and who knows, in this case, social platforms much better than me when it comes to spreading awareness and doing some advocacy work. So I'll actually hand over to my students. Okay, is that fine?
Yes, thank you so much. Gerd, Sofia, you'll be speaking on behalf of the group.
Thank you. Yeah. So, as also mentioned, last year we had a class about responsible tourism. And after our first lecture about this topic, we found it both fascinating and important. We were also surprised to realize just how large a problem this actually is and how few people seem to be aware of it. We quickly found ourselves after class asking our teacher Åsa, why have we never learned about this before? And why are we the only class in this school learning about this? And after researching and discussing with people our age, our recommendations for reaching out to more young people is that all education institutes should have incorporated ethical tourism as a part of a mandatory subject, at least for the young people in primary school. We also know that social media can reach out to many people quickly in this relevant age group. So using platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok can help spread the message. Although in our project, helping ECPAT with the social media campaign, we saw that this takes a lot of time and planning. And having a small platform or a specific narrow follow group can be a challenge. So we suggest collaborating with trustful, well-known influencers who can acknowledge the problem and promote solutions. And another effective strategy for going viral on social media is exposing and canceling. And that would mean calling out the companies and people that actively promote this kind of volunteer tourism. And this could also include influencers who have worked or collaborated with these companies before and now speaking up about the mistake they made. Also, I want to mention we can collaborate with documentary TV programs that focus on these type of problems and or podcast series in collaboration with expert influencers and journalists can be a useful tool to spread awareness about this problem. And that's it for us. Thank you for giving us the time and chance to talk.
Thank you so much. That's amazing to have a group of committed young people who actually want to make a change and make tourism ethical. It's great hearing from you, and we really value your recommendations. Thank you so much. Thank you, Åsa, and
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we'll move now to Katerina. It's a great pleasure to have you with us. I know you just finished a big conference of the Alliance Against Trafficking, and we really look forward to hearing from you on how we can build together this global movement.
Thank you so much to the ECPAT team, to Guillaume, Gabriela, and everyone else for inviting us for this meeting. I think our both organizations have done a fantastic job in timing the launch of our publications. So this is great and this is very exciting. As Gabriela just indicated, we just concluded our high-level alliance conference against trafficking in persons, which focused this year on the topic of child trafficking, and we focused on the most overlooked and less understood forms of child trafficking. And this is where we all agree the phenomenon of orphanage trafficking fits very well in the overlooked and let alone understood forms of trafficking. So we decided to use the Alliance also to launch our publication of the role of OSCE participating states in combating orphanage trafficking. And we have used this bold title because there's very little understanding here in the OSCE why it matters to the states here when we speak about orphanages in Africa, Asia, and South America. So we wanted to make clear already with the title that we do have a role to play because we have created the problem, so we have the responsibility to fix it. So this is why we are very bold with our report. And I have just marked in two purple squares some fields that I wanted to highlight from the study. So one is I think we can say we are one of the very few that really go into detail of the role of the tech sector. We have already reached out to the tech sector, and we have spoken to some social media platforms to see how we can work together to decrease the risks on social media, because there are so many statistics out there that highlight that between 70 and 80% of young people use social media to get inspired for travel destinations, and 50% of those even say they want to use is a travel destination so they can show off on social media. And unfortunately, orphanages, working with children, having selfies with children works very well to show off on social media. So this is something that we address here and that we're also addressing with the tech sector. And just like I said, our key target audience here in the OSCE region are the policymakers. There are national anti-trafficking coordinators, national anti-trafficking rapporteurs. So they are our key target audience for this report. The next slide. So what I wanted to say regarding the momentum, I think what we see, there is definitely a momentum to address and to prioritize child trafficking. Just a few examples. In 2023, ECPAT, the Interagency Coordination Group Against Trafficking, launched an accelerated call for action to end child trafficking. In 2024, the Special Representative on Children and Armed Conflict dedicated a special report on child trafficking and armed conflict. Just this year, in 2025, the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children dedicated her thematic report to the Human Rights Council on child trafficking, and we ourselves dedicated our high-level alliance conference to the topic of child trafficking. And we had the highest number of in-person attendance that we ever had. We had roughly around 500 people in person, and we had over 300 people that joined us online. And I think this is exactly the momentum that we have to use, that there is this interest to prioritize child trafficking. And I am convinced that by now, all of us here in this group and those who are not here in this group, we have all ingredients and tools at hand that we need to address the topic of orphanage trafficking, but also to mitigate the risks of children exploited in the context of travel and tourism. And what I mean when I say ingredients, and this is what I wanted to show on the slides, we have outstanding research and data, thanks to the work of Dr. Knapp, Dr. Kate van Door, but also the students that just spoke from Norway. And this evidence gives us, as the OSCE, as an organization, the tool to build the case, that this is an issue that really exists. It provides us the data. Then we have reports like ours, among many others, that are supposed to work as an advocacy tool to raise awareness about the why. Why does it matter for us here in the OSCE region? Then third, we have the political support. And we heard it from Anna from ECPAT Philippines. It's an obligation. It's not a matter of how, it's a matter of how, not a matter of if. And we have this outstanding report from the Special Rapporteur on the Sale of Children. We have the IPU resolution. We have the EU directive. We have the GA resolution. We are all aware they are not legally binding, but they are international policy and legal frameworks that provide the obligation to address the issue. And last but not least, we have the tools that provide the guidance step by step on how to address the issue. Just like the ECPAT report that we're launching today, but also the IPU legislative toolkit. So we have all of these ingredients. So I think it's now really time to use the momentum and to collaborate. And we said, for example, in our alliance, it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes the whole of a society to combat child trafficking. And I think all of us, we have our respective mandates, we have our respective networks, we have our respective stakeholders that we work together. And I think this all together will help us to use the momentum to really address it and to put what we have into action. And for that, we need to really identify the political champions. We do have already Senator Reynolds. We also have now the UK Foreign State Secretary, who really prioritizes care reform, who launched his care reform campaign, who already said he wants to have some moments on orphanage trafficking. So I think these are the champions that we have to use, that we have to leverage, and then have to be our advocates. So I'm very passionate. I'm still fully energized from the Alliance. So thank you for inviting me to quickly give an update also from our side and how I envision the next steps and how we can use the momentum. Our report is not online yet because it was just launched in paper, but it will be online, we hope, next week. And then I can share the link with ECPAT. Maybe you can share also through your network. And we will do the same, of course, with your report. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And we're really happy that you are bringing all the approaches together, and that's where we are looking forward to cooperating together. And the studies are showing this actionable approaches that we can take, and this movement has been growing over the last years. So with this, I'll hand over to Rebecca to reflect on building the stronger cooperation and what we already documented also in the case studies. The practical approaches are there, but how we can make sure that more people come on board.
Thank you, Gabriella. Yes, well, I think as Katerina has really brilliantly outlined, there is a lot of momentum that has already been built, and we are at that critical juncture now where we have the growing body of evidence, the documentation, the awareness of the harms that unregulated volunteerism can cause to children, particularly when their safety and their rights and their best interests are not prioritized in the development of these volunteerism products. And at the same time, we can see that there is increasing alignment between other global agendas and this agenda that also build momentum and support the need for volunteerism regulation. And that includes the expanding and renewed commitments amongst governments to end violence against children in all its forms, which also incorporated a focus on orphanage trafficking in residential care settings, as well as the sexual exploitation of children in travel and tourism. And parallel to this, we have the sustainable and ethical tourism agenda that is gaining traction, and that's being reinforced by the Building Back Better agenda, which emphasizes the well-being of communities and also the importance of child-safe tourism. And as Katerina mentioned, we have the UNGA resolution on the rights of the child from 2019, which was the first time we saw an international commitment by states to combat orphanage trafficking and recognizing that orphanage tourism and voluntourism is a demand-side driver that incentivizes that particular type of trafficking, leading to not only states committing to take steps and actions to combat it, but also a global call to prohibit that particular form of voluntourism. Building on that, we have the report from the Special Rapporteur, Mama Fatima, on voluntourism, which has been so instrumental in highlighting the very specific risks associated with voluntourism that involves children, but also reinforcing its relevance to those other broader global agendas. And now we have this amazing global case study being launched today that documents the momentum that is already building at the country level, showcasing how countries are taking the mandate to look at this issue and address it and turning it into concrete, actionable models and seeing real change happening for children. So I think there are several ways that we can leverage this case study to continue to build upon the momentum and regulate volunteerism. And the first is to encourage all states, both sending and receiving countries, to make that commitment to regulating volunteerism within their territories, but also, to Mama Fatima's point, extraterritorially. So it captures the range of behaviours, not only within their country's borders, but their citizens and residents' conduct when they are also overseas. This is not an issue that can be dealt with by receiving countries alone. And the case study makes that very clear because it is a global issue. It is driven by interconnected economies and global supply chains. And so it has to be addressed in that framework of international cooperation. And the case study really highlights how sending and receiving countries work together in tandem in order to close all of the gaps and ensure children are safe in volunteerism practices. But to secure those commitments at the country level, what we found is that countries may need to link this regulatory agenda to some of those other aligned agendas in their country that are already progressing. And that's about identifying these entry points that many of the panelists spoke about today. And that helps overcome that perception that volunteerism is too niche to warrant its own regulatory agenda. And the case study highlights how countries have identified those entry points and leveraged them effectively, whether it's linking to ending violence against children, sustainable tourism, or, as we heard from Cambodia, child protection and care reforms. Second, to build on that momentum, and again, as Katerina really outlined already, we do need to move from the why to the how. And there is no one-size-fits-all approach. The case study really highlights that again. We've heard from speakers that the country's existing structures, whether that's governmental structures, whether it's legislation and regulation that exists, they're too diverse to promote a universal model. And so the case study sets out this process of conducting a landscape analysis that leads you through a process of identifying the stakeholders, identifying the existing laws, identifying the segments of volunteerism that fit within the jurisdiction, identifying the specific risks, the gaps, the opportunities, so that countries can develop contextualized strategies that suit their context to really drive towards concrete action. And I think that is really critical to building momentum because it demystifies the process and allows countries to really come up with targeted approaches. And to scale that, I think we need to see more of what we've already seen happening, which is different intergovernmental bodies at the international level, but also at regional levels, take this and embed it within their frameworks. The IPU resolution on orphanage trafficking was a fantastic example of that, and that promotes implementation. And already we're seeing parliamentarians taking that framework back and advocating for strengthened criminal laws around orphanage trafficking, but also addressing the issue of volunteerism with children. And just want to congratulate Katerina and her team at OSCE on the report that was released yesterday. That is a fantastic effort and another amazing example of that very thing, of really taking it and embedding it within existing frameworks that really promote implementation amongst countries who already are in cooperative agreements with each other. So I think it's important to scale by looking for the next opportunities to do that, by integrating this in regional intergovernmental bodies across APEC, across the ASEAN region, SAARC, the African Union, so that we can really ensure that this volunteerism regulatory agenda becomes a core part of those regional policy discussions, linking to both their human rights mechanisms, but also conversations about sustainable tourism. And the last thing I want to say is how important it is to continue to document the learning from countries. Just as we've seen today in this case study, that country-to-country learning is so important in building momentum. It makes it concrete, tangible. It demonstrates that it can be achieved in very diverse socioeconomic and cultural and political environments, and shows how countries really can work together to progress this agenda to ensure that children are safe in volunteerism all around the world. So it's so exciting to see the momentum building. I believe this case study really does fill a unique gap in providing those actionable models to really demonstrate how this can happen. Thank you, Gabriela.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And in fact, we hope that these practical examples will be used to inspire others and take action, because they are already practical examples. And that it is in that case study we managed to track these processes, and it shows how this can be done. So with this, I will now open the questions from the public, and I will invite also other panelists to speak. We have with us also Esti from ECPAT Indonesia, and then Down to Zero Alliance, who worked on regulating and addressing the issue of voluntourism in Indonesia. We have Emma and Fiachra from Cochlam and Orphanage Volunteering Group in Ireland, who also worked on this topic, and their experience are documented in this case study. And we also have Anna from Ann-Kristin Vervik from ECPAT Norway, who worked closely with OSA and the students at the university to bring forward the communication campaigns and other initiatives on regulating volunteerism. So I would also like to welcome you to this panel and open now for questions and answers from questions from the public. I see there are some questions already in Q&A, so maybe let me start. Some are already answered, but let's see. Do we have? I think now there are specific. There is a question from Kenya, from a social worker, who is actively involved in care reform and the use of the social media to traffic children, how to identify such cases of using the social media to traffic children. Anybody would like to reflect on this question?
I can just, sorry, AC is raising her hand. AC,
Yeah,
go
Esti,
ahead.
go ahead, and then Katrina. Go.
Okay, this is maybe hello everyone. My name is Esti from ECPAT Indonesia, and I try to answer the question. And this is also my reflection when I implemented the program of volunteerism. And first question maybe from the Naomi, and I will give addition to Rebecca's answer maybe. From me is there is no such a escalation process to intervene or to prevent this issue. That all the action have to do simultaneously, both in the national level to advocate for the regulation, to the very local level to include or to as a local level as the local agent to also contribute to participate on the prevention. This is what we also done in Bali when we included a local agent from the customary leader and also the local community in the village level as the maybe like a watchdog in the neighborhood. So the neighborhood, the community can monitor what going on in their area, because the nuance of the volunteerism practices is very sporadic and unregistered. So it is very hard to take a list on them. So when the local agent can be empowered to take the same action, it will be better. And then for the why the reason why the private sector, maybe from the school to why they hire like the native speaker maybe to be a teacher, this is maybe a good point in the business, so they can add some services and a value on the business. But to prevent the bad things to happen is maybe the school itself can set the specific competence from the teachers with the thorough background check from their previous criminal activity maybe, and also the school have to have the child safeguarding policy, so that when the cases happen, they know how to mitigate, and also the potential risk of the activity can be calculated. That's the question from the Naomi from me. And also the third question. Can I answer other question, Gabriela, or I can give to other panelists?
Yeah, thank you for that. And maybe Katerina can also add on the social media, because you've been doing also some research on that.
Yes, thank you, Gabriela, and I will be very brief. So when we already briefed to the social media, so we are taking a bit of a different angle. I said in the beginning to the representative from the social media that I won't be able to show any examples of exploitative content, because I would hope so that content moderation already filters this out. But the issue is that social media is driving the demand for orphanage trafficking. So one needs to look behind the picture, what we actually see in front of you, and they will not filter this out, because we're speaking about volunteers with children, we speak about fundraising, we speak about GoFundMe pages. One needs to look behind. And the three issues we have identified on social media, despite the fact that there is full of encouragement on going actually to volunteer, there is no raising awareness about the harm. There's a lot of encouragement to actually go and volunteer and help and play and fund. So this is, of course, the biggest concern. But then I think where for me, and this is where the entry point comes in, there are three areas. So the first is there is clear evidence in social media that children are used as objects for entertainment, as tourist attractions. The newest trend is really promoting your birthday parties at an orphanage on social media. TikTok is full of videos where women rent or people rent an orphanage and they celebrate the birthday at an orphanage. And they highlight this as a really good experience. There are so many examples of, I mean, we all know the selfies that are going around on TikTok and all the other social media platforms. Then there are so many safeguarding and concerns. We found Google reviews where people actively reach out on the orphanage on Google reviews to request for the availability of orphan girls. This is clear safeguarding concerns. All these reviews are evidence that those who go to the orphanage have unlimited access to the children because they proudly say you can do whatever with them, what you want, you can take them on walks. This is all evidence. Then, of course, also as soon as you Google orphanage on Google reviews or Google Maps, you get the full address, you get the children who are placed in these orphanages, the opening hours, the contact details. There is no safeguarding whatsoever about these children, highly vulnerable, residing in these places. There's a full access. And then, of course, last but not least, there are so many other violations of children's rights, in particular when we think about the dignity of children. There are so many GoFundMe pages, especially on TikTok, where you see starving children, you see children that are sick, and they are used to raise funds. And these are the concerns that we are trying to addressing, how we can use social media to mitigate the risks, because we know content moderation is not picking this up, so they need to take additional steps. They cannot just leave it to an AI-facilitated content moderation boost.
Thank you, Katerina. I saw there are questions. I asked Rahab and Rogers to type their questions in the chat. So while we are waiting for these questions, I will hand over to Emma and Fiachra also to give your perspective from Ireland.
Thank you very much just for a really informative and I suppose encouraging for us on the island of Ireland. We're delighted and really welcome this case study, and it'll assist us in leveraging more conversation about this in Ireland. I suppose we hope to learn from others as well on an ongoing basis, because we find that with every new group of policymakers that come in, we have to start the education process again. I would also just like to really commend the students in Norway, and I will be telling students and their lecturers in Ireland about what you're doing, because maybe there'll be collaborations between universities in Europe on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. That would be great to establish this cooperation among students as well. Fiachra?
Yeah, no, just to echo everything Emma said, it's been a really fantastic and interesting event for us to listen to and really get a sense of the work that's being done in very different ways in different parts of the world. And it's just really, really inspiring for our own work as well. I suppose one area that kind of has been mentioned a few times is around social media and the need for regulation. I suppose another area as well is the education, especially around young people in terms of how social media is being used and the kind of messages they're both receiving and also communicating through the likes of TikTok and other platforms as well. So this might be of interest to some people. I'm just going to drop it in the chat. We've worked with a number of European partners on an education online learning course that might be useful for people who want to kind of unpack some of the ethical communication stuff. So just to signpost that, it may be very useful at a kind of educational level rather than say a policy level. But other than that, yeah, just thanks very much again for the space, and I think we can take a lot of these learnings back to the people we're collaborating with in Ireland.
Thanks so much. And also your experiences are documented in this case study. So that will be inspiring for others to read. And I will also invite Anne-Christine for your final reflections.
Thank you so much, Gabriella, and thanks to all the excellent presentations. It's been so enriching to learn from you. I would just like to mention that for the first time ever, we had an exhibition at education fairs We started in January this year, and we've been to 3 of the largest cities in Norway to talk to young people about volunteerism. And we had around 25,000 young people between the ages of 15 to 19 passing our stand and looking at the messages. And we had conversations with around 500 of those. And what kind of disturbed us is that not a single person knew about this problem, or they had never heard about the term, or nothing about it. And so we do really look forward to, taking on the recommendations from the young people in Stavanger and continue this awareness raising and trying to get it into the curriculum, because it's really important. And I also wanted to mention that part of our advocacy has been, to have meetings both with the Ministry of Justice. They are developing a new strategy on human trafficking. We do hope that the regulation of volunteerism will be part of it, but we are a bit concerned that they will not address issues facing children outside of Norway. So we really have to continue that advocacy with partners. And another concern is that we were going to have a meeting in December with the focal point of child trafficking at the Directorate of Children, which is under the Ministry of Children. And I did a search on the website to see what they were doing to address child trafficking, and actually saw that under the Erasmus Plus program they had on their own website, they had links to some of the worst forms of orphanage tourism and other really harmful volunteerism products. And so when we met with them and made them aware, we found that they had no knowledge of the issue at all. So there is still a lot of work to do, but information is key, and I think there is a will to do something about it. But let's see what happens with the strategy. We might need your help there. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ann-Christine, and it's great we can all join our forces together on working more on this topic and building on this momentum. And with this, considering that we have 10 minutes left in this meeting, any unanswered questions we can answer by email. Please place them in the Q&A box. And for now, I'll ask Mama Fatima to bring your final remarks and conclusion of this meeting. So over to you, Mama Fatima.
Thank you very much, Gabriela, and thank you so much to ECPAT International and all the speakers here who shared their insight on this very important subject matter. I think one takeaway for me from this discussion is that we should never stop talking about this, and we need to continue shining a light on the issue of sexual abuse or this general exploitation of children through voluntourism. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay, so just one point. One point is, I think it's very important for us to not only talk about this, but also ensure targeted information sharing and targeted awareness raising, particularly for government officials. You'll be surprised how many government officials who do not know much or anything about the issue of volunteerism. And I think I think you touched on it in the case study, but specific government departments such as Department of Tourism, responsible for children, Department of Foreign Affairs, they need to be sensitized continuously, because they tend to influence policy, and it's the policies that would determine the kind of laws that would be in place, the kind of regulation that needs to be in place, and the need for strengthening of safeguarding measures for children. It's also important to get young people involved in this conversation. Targeted awareness raising for young people is equally as important. And I see that during this conversation, we talked a little bit about social media. I think we can also use social media as a means of disseminating and raising awareness, disseminating information on volunteerism and raising awareness on the subject matter. So generally, conversation, and never stop talking about the issue. And we do have the tools, we do have researches, we just need to disseminate the information for more understanding of the subject matter and more action on the issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with this, Guillaume, over to you for the final conclusion and way forward.
Yeah, thank you, Gabriela. I feel enthusiastic about this conversation in the sense that, you know, this is something we could have described for a long time, all the manifestation, all the problems, all the negativity that can be seen as a result of the misuse of volunteering opportunity and volunteerism. But I think the emphasis of that case study is what are we doing about it? And can we deal with it? And how it's the sum of so many things that are part of a package. It's in all of us to be able to really sort of rally around this, find it sufficiently important to put it on the agenda and get things going. And that's what's really inspiring from the student in Norway and possibly from now on from many other countries who just, you know, get triggered and say, hey, how come we're not hearing about this? What can we do about this? To the company in Sri Lanka, was saying, you know, we can still be successful while being careful and doing our parts there. To the Philippines modifying its legislation, Cambodia introducing standard operating procedures, Ireland introducing also minimum standards applicable to the entire ecosystem of volunteering opportunities abroad, and so many other examples of this. So I'm particularly thankful for the leadership that the civil society organizations, ECPAT Philippines, ECPAT Stop in Sri Lanka, and equally as well in Cambodia and the rest of the world. We haven't heard from our colleagues in Africa who are also part of the documentation process. And the examples from, for instance, Germany and the Netherlands, looking at the side of the demand aspect of things we heard from Celine before. So there's a lot of movement at the moment on this, and hopefully that's what stays after this webinar. You can look at the tool in itself and being inspired, and let's make just this as a step and or even sometimes the beginning of how we can continue to work on this all together. It's important, and that's only possible because you're all here in this conversation. So thank you very much, and thank you, Gabriela, for your immense leadership as well on this. It's formidable to work alongside you there. And just mentioning, of course, we're lucky to count on UBS Optimus Foundation, who's been sort of innovative in wanting to support us on something of this nature. So thank you all. And please, let's keep up the good work together.
Thank you, everybody. We keep working together. Thank you very much. And we are closing now this webinar.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mama Fatima.
It's a pleasure. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.